Yeah, so I'm very sympathetic to exactly what you were saying about how theology needs to terminate in a normative moment, in which we're saying who God is, what His revelation tells us, how we're required to respond to it, these sort of things. But I find it not so much the Kantian skepticism, people's reluctance to, to make a claim, as much as their reluctance to imply that other people are wrong in their claims. And once you begin to make normative claims, a contrary, incompatible normative claim therefore has to be excluded. And I find this all the time in undergraduate classrooms. One of the difficulties getting conversations started with students is that when they stake out a position, that means that they find themselves in the position of saying that someone else's position is incorrect. And nobody wants to be the person who seems to judge others. And I would say that even for the church's collective memory, we have in the 20th century memories of people who seem to be excluded on normative grounds because their theology was thought to be deficient. We can think of all the sort of Nouvelle Theologie and so forth. And then all of a sudden emerge the winners, as it seems, at some future moment. And so people I think are afraid of repeating that sort of history. And I find this is a general reluctance on the part of academic theology.
That's very interesting, because what I'm hearing you say is you're adverting to two things very helpfully. And the first is when we talk about something like a normative claim, that is, for lack of a better word, an objective basis. Namely, studying theologians is useful, and there are other types of theology rather than just those that terminate in a normative statement. And yet, even those, let's say, auxiliary positive theological inquiries, which are legitimate and are theological, they still are understood hierarchically in relation to a normative, objective order. But then what this is very interesting is that you're also pointing to the fact that, and I'll ask maybe, are you saying then that rather than an objective, hierarchical, normative claims, positive theology, that kind of line, we're now entering into, or we're dealing with a moment where the subjective has actually is specifying, guiding, and even maybe restricting some of the theological discourse? And I ask that, and I welcome your response, obviously, because I would say that that's a shared middle term. My fear of offending a colleague, not deliberately, but just saying something that, in a way that you would disagree with, that subjective concern, I would propose, shares a lot in common with theologianology, because now we're viewing people of the past as also subjects that I'm trying to reconcile or investigate. So I see that's very interesting, and I see continuity there.
And well, I do think that, yes, that the desire to want to be serene, inclusive, appreciative, because we're all social animals, if we want to put it that way, who live in community and who know that actually that having a community of scholars is a condition for doing good theology. We can't do this on our own. And so therefore, there's always an internal pressure to maintain those community bonds, which always means, maybe pulling one's punches a little bit at this or that moment for the sake of harmony. I think that's just a general human pressure. But then even the theologians of the past and the theologianology to be able to include everybody in the pantheon is part of that. So people's favorite theologians therefore have to have a place at the table, and so that also, I think, makes people reluctant to have very strong normative claims for or against any of them. And so maybe you can say there's a way in which they intersect, but.